When I first saw her, she was chained to a fence post, beaten, blamed, rejected. I didn't even know her name. But what that silent woman did in the next few days changed everything, not just my life, but also what I knew about truth, strength, and dignity. The sun stood high, harsh, and unforgiving. Dry wind scraped across the arroyo, carrying the scent of blood and heat. Nothing moved except the vultures. They circled above, slow and patient, watching the man who lay still on the cracked earth below. He was face down, arms limp at his sides. His coat was torn. Blood had dried in thick patches across his shoulder and back. One boot was missing. The other hung from his foot by a broken lace. His lips were split, and flies danced near the corners of his mouth. He did not speak. He did not cry out. He had no strength left for sound. From the ridge above, a figure appeared, barefoot, still, wrapped in faded cloth and shadow. Taya did not rush. She stepped with care, feeling the ground before her as she made her way down into the arroyo. Her long black hair was tied with a strip of leather. Around her neck hung a pouch stitched with red thread. Her eyes stayed on the man, but her face showed no alarm. She knelt beside him, her knees pressing into the hot sand. Her hands were steady as she pulled back his collar and looked at the wound. It was deep. A bullet had torn through the flesh just below the shoulder blade. The bleeding had slowed, but the skin around it was angry and swollen. He would not last much longer. Taya looked to the sky, then back to him. "You are not dead," she said quietly. The man did not answer. His breath rattled, shallow and rough. She stood and moved to the edge of the arroyo. There, among the brittle brush, she began gathering long branches. Some were dry and sharp, others bent under pressure. She broke the ones that would not hold. Her hands worked fast but calm. She tied a frame with rawhide from her belt, checking each knot twice. When the stretcher was done, she returned to the man. Gently, she lifted him, sliding her arms beneath his chest. He groaned once, weak and broken. His eyes fluttered open, but he did not see her. His head dropped back. Taya laid him on the stretcher and secured him with another strip of leather. Then, with a deep breath, she grabbed the ends of the frame and began to pull. Her feet sank into the dust. The sun pressed down. Her arms shook from the weight. But she kept going, step after step, dragging him out of the arroyo and into the red silence of the desert. Behind them, the vultures rose higher, disappointed. She did not look back. The canyon rose around them like old hands reaching toward the sun. Jagged walls of rock caught the heat and threw it back down. Dust clung to Taya's legs as she pulled the stretcher over the rough trail, one slow step at a time. Her shoulders ached, but she did not stop. The man on the stretcher, still nameless to her, murmured in his sleep. Sometimes it was a word, sometimes a sound. Once he whispered, "Maria," and then nothing else for a long time. Taya did not ask who Maria was. She climbed higher, choosing a narrow path known only to her. The trail bent behind a curtain of rock, where a small hollow opened up near the cliff wall. It was a place she had used before. Not home, but close enough. A flat space, half shaded by overhang. Stones piled at one end formed a windbreak. A shallow fire pit waited in the middle. She laid the stretcher beside the largest stone. The man's face was pale now. His breath came sharp, uneven. The wound had bled again. Taya knelt beside him and untied the leather strips. Her hands moved with quiet purpose. She cut away the dry cloth and cleaned the wound using water from a gourd. Then she reached into her pouch and pulled out a handful of crushed leaves. She mashed them against a stone, mixed them with a pinch of ash, and pressed the paste into the wound. His body jerked at the pain, but his eyes stayed closed. He whispered another name. "Thomas, I am sorry." Taya leaned back. Her face did not change. She rinsed the cloth in silence and tied fresh bandages across his chest. Then she placed her hand lightly on his brow. It burned with fever. She stood, gathered a few dry twigs, and built a fire. When it caught, she placed a small clay pot near the flame and filled it with water. From her pouch, she added bitter roots and bark. The scent was strong, earthy, medicine to cool the blood. He turned in his sleep, chest rising in shudders. Sweat lined his temples. His lips moved again. Do not leave. Taya's eyes stayed on him, but she said nothing. She picked up a damp cloth and pressed it to his neck. The fever would have to run its course. She sat beside him all night. The canyon was still. The fire popped once, sending sparks into the dark. Coyotes called in the distance. Taya did not answer. By morning, the man had stopped whispering. His body was still, but the fever had not broken. Taya poured more herbs into the pot and stirred it slowly. She had seen death before, many times, but still she waited. The sun had not yet reached the canyon floor when Daniel opened his eyes. His breath came sharp. His heart pounded. The sky above him was blue, too wide, too empty. For a moment, he did not remember where he was or why his chest burned. Then he tried to sit up, and pain gripped him like a vice. He groaned, falling back against something soft. A folded cloth. A blanket. There was smoke in the air and the scent of bitter herbs. His hand moved toward his side. Bandages. Footsteps approached. He turned his head and saw her. She stepped into the light without a word, holding a clay bowl. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes met his without flinching. "Where am I?" he rasped. She knelt beside him and lifted the bowl. "Drink." He hesitated, then took the water. It was cool and bitter, but it eased the fire in his throat. He drank deeply, coughing once, then handed it back. "Who are you?" he asked, voice rough. "Taya," she said. That was all. He stared at her. "Why did you help me?" She stood and walked back to the fire. Without turning, she said, "Because you were not dead." The fire cracked once. He looked down at his hands. They were bruised, scraped, trembling. His mouth opened to speak again, but no sound came. She was already placing more wood on the fire, moving with slow precision. Later, as the light faded, he watched her from where he lay. She sat on a low stone, sharpening a knife against a flat piece of bone. The motion was steady, not rushed, not careless. The sound of metal against bone echoed in the hush. Beyond the shelter, coyotes howled. Daniel's stomach turned. Something about her silence unnerved him. She was not like any woman he had known. Not soft, not afraid. She moved like someone who had learned not to expect kindness, or to wait for it. He pulled the blanket higher across his chest. "You live here?" he asked quietly. Taya did not answer. She kept sharpening the blade, eyes fixed on the edge. "I do not mean harm," he added. She paused, looked at him once, then nodded slowly. "I know." He wanted to ask more, but the firelight made his eyes heavy. Pain pulled at his ribs. His breath came harder. As sleep crept in, he watched her rise and place the knife beside her bedroll. She moved like a shadow, sharp when needed, silent when not. He did not understand her, but he felt something strange. Not fear, not exactly. Something older, something deeper. Safety, maybe, but the kind that keeps a blade close by. The sun moved slow across the canyon wall, marking time without care. Daniel sat propped against a flat stone, his coat folded in his lap. One arm still ached, and the bandages on his chest were tight, but the fever had passed. His skin no longer burned, though his thoughts did. Taya sat near the fire, her legs crossed beneath her. She held a needle made from bone and a long thread dyed red. His coat lay across her knees. She stitched with quiet focus, her fingers moving as if they had done this 1,000 times. Daniel watched her work. "It happened near Painted Bluff," he said, breaking the silence. She did not look up, but her hand paused for half a second before the needle slipped through the cloth again. "I was riding west," he continued. "Took a shortcut through the basin. Should have known better." Taya said nothing. "There were 3 of them," he said. "No faces I recognized. No warning. Just bullets and dust. One of them called my name before they fired. That is how I knew it was not random." He picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers. "My horse was hit first. Went down hard. I landed bad. Next thing I knew, I was bleeding behind a rock, and they were gone." The stone dropped from his hand. "Bounty hunters, maybe, or someone who thinks I owe them something I do not." He looked at her. She kept stitching. "I never gave them my name," he said quietly. "But they knew it." Taya tied a knot in the thread and bit it clean. Then she picked up the other sleeve. Daniel's voice lowered. "Names are dangerous, I guess." She glanced at him, then back to the cloth. Only when someone else owns them. He watched her for a long moment. Where are you from? The question hung in the warm air. The fire popped. Outside, a breeze stirred dry leaves. Taya set the coat aside. Nowhere I can return to, she said. Her voice was even. Not sad. Not bitter. Just true. Daniel nodded slowly. He did not ask more. Instead, he reached for the coat she had finished. The stitches were tight, straight. Red thread against old brown fabric. The mark of her hand now in his. He pulled it over his shoulders. It fit better than before. You sew well, he said. Taya shrugged. It is not hard, once you learn to see where things tear. Daniel stared into the fire. I have a feeling I tore something too. She looked at him, not with judgment, not with pity, just stillness. You did not die, she said. He gave a faint smile. And that is enough. For now. The sun climbed slow as Daniel followed her through the canyon. His steps were unsteady, but he walked without help. Taya led the way, silent as always, her long hair tied back, her bow strapped across her shoulder. She did not look behind her, but she matched her pace to his breath. They moved uphill along a narrow trail carved by wind and time. Rocks crunched beneath their feet. Above them, a hawk circled once, then vanished behind a ridge. After some time, the trail opened into a small clearing. At the center, water trickled down smooth stone into a shallow pool. The spring was not large, but it was clear and cold. Taya knelt and cupped her hands. She drank first, then stepped aside. Daniel sank down slowly, dipped both hands into the pool, and splashed water on his face. The cold bit into him, fresh and sharp. He sat back and looked at her. She stood near the water, her back to him now. Her shawl had slipped low. Across her shoulder blades, thin white scars ran like faded ink. Some long, some short. He stared, not meaning to. Taya had turned her head slightly, but she did not cover herself. I did not earn them in war, she said. He looked down, unsure if he should speak. She sat near the edge of the water, knees drawn close, arms wrapped around them. I was punished, she said. For what? For telling the truth, she replied. Her voice was calm, but not empty. Daniel shifted closer. What truth? Taya did not answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the surface of the spring. Someone powerful. Someone trusted. I saw him do something. I spoke of it. And the ones who heard me said I lied. Daniel's jaw tightened. So they turned you out? She nodded once. I was 16. The silence between them filled with wind and the soft trickle of water over stone. I am sorry, Daniel said. Taya looked at him now. Why? Because it was wrong. Her mouth pressed into something like a smile, but did not reach her eyes. That is how they said I looked. When they said I was lying. He lowered his gaze. Do you regret it? He asked softly. Taya's eyes turned back toward the ridge. Regret, she said, is for people who still hope. The words fell like dust. Daniel said nothing more. He did not try to explain, did not try to comfort. They sat side by side, the spring between them, the truth between them, a truth that left marks not even water could wash away. The path to the trading post was dry and harsh. Dust clung to their boots. Daniel walked a little stronger now, though the wound in his side still pulled with each breath. Taya stayed just ahead of him, as always, her back straight, her face unreadable. When the post came into view, a cluster of buildings with wagons lined out front, Daniel slowed. Are you sure you want to come? He asked. Taya kept walking. You need supplies. He nodded, but he watched the way she adjusted her shawl, how her hand moved close to the knife at her waist. The post was quiet, but not empty. A few men stood near a trough, talking low. 2 women sat on the porch of the small chapel. One of them stopped speaking when she saw Taya. As they passed, the woman spit near Taya's feet. Taya did not flinch. Daniel did not stop, but his jaw tightened. Inside the trading post, the air smelled of flour, salt, and tobacco. Behind the counter stood a wide man with sharp eyes and a gray beard. His gaze moved to Taya the moment she stepped in, then narrowed. Daniel walked up and placed a folded paper on the counter, a list. Dried meat, thread, powdered willow bark, coffee, and a tin of salve, he said. The trader did not move. He looked at Daniel, then at Taya. No trade today, he said flatly. Daniel kept his voice calm. I have silver. Not enough for her, the trader replied. Taya turned to leave, but Daniel stepped forward. She is not here to beg. She saved my life. The man raised his chin. Then take her back to wherever that was. Daniel slowly reached into his coat and placed a handful of coins on the wood. The silver shone under the lantern light. I will take what you will sell, he said. The trader hesitated, then pulled 2 items from the shelf, coffee and the salve. He left the rest where it sat. Daniel gathered the goods, placed them in his bag, and turned without another word. Outside, the air hit harder than before. The same woman on the porch stared at them as they passed. She should not be here, the woman muttered. Daniel stopped. He looked at the woman, then at Taya, and then down at the dirt. She is not the problem, he said. Then he kept walking. Taya walked beside him. Her face was calm, but her fingers were tight around the strap of the bag. They said nothing for a while. At the edge of the post, Daniel stopped and looked back. They will not forget, he said. No, Taya replied, but I'm not here to be remembered. The fire burned low in the canyon. Shadows moved softly along the stone walls. Taya sat near the flame. A strip of torn fabric stretched across her knees. Her fingers moved with quiet rhythm. In the light, the red thread looked like a thin trail of blood winding through the cloth. Daniel watched from a few steps away, leaning against the stone wall, his shoulder wrapped in a clean bandage. The wind stirred his coat, and the stars blinked overhead. You always use red, he said quietly. Taya nodded, eyes still on her stitching. Why? She paused. Her fingers rested on the thread. Then she spoke. Because it shows where things were torn. I did not want to forget. Daniel stepped closer and sat near the fire. He held his hands out toward the heat, but his eyes stayed on her work. Do you ever sew something new? He asked. Taya gave a faint smile. Only what survives. He looked into the fire for a long moment. Then he spoke, slow and careful. I have land, east of Mesilla. It is not much, but it has water, a place to grow something, a roof, a barn, if the wind has not taken it yet. Taya kept sewing. You could come, he added, if you wanted. She finished a row and tied the thread. Her hand pressed the cloth flat against her knee. I do not belong to places, she said. Daniel looked at her. Then belong to no one, he said softly. Just live. The fire crackled once. A dry twig snapped. Neither of them moved. Taya set the needle aside and looked out into the darkness beyond the fire's edge. Everywhere I have stayed, she said, someone has tried to take something. Then take something back, Daniel said. She turned to him. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something sharp. I'm not a seed. I do not grow where I am planted. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. Then let the wind choose where you land. They sat in silence again. The canyon was quiet except for the low whisper of wind passing between the rocks. After a time, Taya folded the cloth she had mended and placed it inside her pouch. She stood, her movements smooth and silent. Her shadow stretched long behind her in the firelight. Daniel watched her walk to the edge of the camp and stand still, eyes on the stars. He stayed where he was. She had not said yes, but she had not said no. The morning sun touched the canyon rim, casting soft light across the shelter. The fire had burned down to ash. The pot was empty. The stitching cloth was folded beside a stone. Daniel woke with a strange tightness in his chest. He sat up slowly. Taya. Silence answered him. He looked around. Her bedroll was gone. Her knife, her pouch, her footprints, gone too. Only a single thread of red remained caught on a low bush near the trail. He did not wait. He saddled his horse with shaking hands and rode hard toward the nearest village. Dust rose behind him in long curls. His breath burned in his chest, but he did not stop. By the time he reached the outskirts, the sun was sharp and high. Then he saw her. Taya was tied to a wooden fence post in the center of the square. Her wrists bound tight. Her shawl was torn. Blood marked her cheek. Her back was straight, her eyes forward. A crowd stood around her, whispering. Daniel pushed through them, heart pounding. What is this? He demanded. A rancher stepped forward, broad shoulders, red face, eyes full of spite. She was caught near my land, he said. Took bread. Spoke dark words. She was whispering over my son. like some kind of curse. Daniel stared at him. And that deserves rope? She is a witch, another voice said. She is a thief, said someone else. She is a woman who walks alone, someone whispered. Daniel stepped closer to Taya. Her face was calm, but her wrists were raw, the rope biting deep. A young voice broke through the noise. It is not true. A boy stepped forward, face dirty, eyes wide. She stopped him from hitting me, the boy said. The man, the rancher. He was mad. He raised his hand. She pulled me back. That is all. The crowd went silent. The rancher turned red. He lies. But no one spoke again. Daniel moved to the post. His hands worked fast, untying the knots. The rope dropped to the ground. Taya swayed but did not fall. He caught her gently, steadying her. She is coming with me, Daniel said. No one stopped him. He led her to the horse, helped her up. Her hands trembled as she gripped the saddle. Her jaw was tight, her eyes dry. As they left the village, the silence behind them was louder than any words. At the canyon, Daniel helped her down. She said nothing. He built the fire. He handed her water. Still, she said nothing. Later, as the stars rose, she sat by the flames, holding her arms close to her chest. You should have let them keep me, she said. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. They would have broken something that does not belong to them. Taya did not reply, but her shoulders sank slightly, and for the first time, she let herself sleep without her knife in hand. The canyon welcomed them without question. No voices, no judgment, only wind moving through stone and the soft hush of footsteps on dust. Daniel led the horse slowly. Taya walked beside it, her head down, her hands wrapped in cloth where the rope had burned her skin. Her face was unreadable. She had not spoken since they left the village. When they reached the old shelter, Daniel built the fire with care. He added dry branches, stacked tight, and struck the flint until the spark caught. The flames grew steady, throwing soft light against the canyon walls. Taya sat beside it, legs folded, shoulders curved inwards. Daniel watched her from across the fire. The heat touched his face, but the cold inside him did not leave. They will not stop, he said finally. Not with whispers, not with stares. I cannot change what they say. Taya's eyes stayed on the flame. But I can stay, he said. She looked up. For a long time, she said nothing. Then her fingers reached into the fold of her sash. She pulled out her pouch, the one stitched in red. Her thumb moved slowly across the threads. They cannot take what I never gave, she whispered. Daniel leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. What did you give? Taya opened the pouch. Inside were 3 seeds. Tiny, brown, light as air. They're from a plant my mother kept, she said. One that only grew when the soil was quiet. Daniel's brow furrowed. What does that mean? She said some things grow best where the world stops speaking. She placed the pouch beside the fire and sat back. He looked at the seeds, then at her hands. You still believe they will grow? I believe I want to try. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. Then we will plant them together. Taya closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the firelight caught a glint of moisture that did not fall. You are not like them, she said. No, Daniel replied. And you are not what they say. The canyon grew quiet again. The flames cracked. A coyote cried far off. Taya leaned closer to the fire. Her hands reached for the warmth. Not in need, but in choice. She was not trembling now. Daniel stood and walked to the side of the shelter where a single patch of earth waited beneath the rocks. He knelt and ran his hand across the soil. Then he returned to the fire. Tomorrow, he said. Taya nodded once. The pouch remained between them. A quiet promise. The next morning, before the sun touched the canyon wall, Taya knelt by the patch of dry earth. Her hands moved with care. She pressed each seed into the soil, one by one, fingers gentle but firm. The ground was hard from too many years of wind and silence. Still, she worked slowly, breaking it apart, giving the roots a chance. Daniel watched from the shelter, his arms crossed, his breath steady. He said nothing. When she was done, Taya sat back on her heels. She did not cover the seeds completely. She let them rest in the light, the way her mother once had. Rain did not come. Not that day. Not the next. But every morning, Taya returned. She cleared the dust. She touched the soil with damp cloth. She whispered nothing over them, only sat near, her legs folded, her red-threaded pouch resting in her lap. Daniel repaired the shelter roof. He chopped wood. He made new handles for the buckets. But his eyes always drifted to where she sat, still and patient. Weeks passed. The canyon stayed dry. Even the birds moved quiet, as if waiting too. Then one morning, Taya bent close to the ground and stilled. A single sprout had broken through the dirt. Thin, fragile, green. She stared at it for a long time. Then her lips moved. Not in a word, not in a prayer. In a smile. Faint, but real. Daniel approached slowly. He knelt beside her. His shadow touched the sprout, but she did not move away. From his pocket, he pulled something small. A piece of red thread. He laid it beside the sprout. No ceremony, no speech. Only the color of survival, resting near the color of life. They stayed like that for a while. Side by side. Not touching, not speaking, but close. Later that day, Daniel cleared a space near the edge of the shelter. Taya brought stones from the canyon and lined the path. They did not say what it was for, but they both understood. A place to walk, a place to begin. That night, the fire burned warm. Taya stitched a new cloth, not torn, not mended, but whole. Her fingers moved slower now. With care, Daniel watched her from across the flames, his eyes soft. You never asked what the seeds were for, she said. I figured, he replied. If you wanted me to know, you would tell me. She nodded. Then she said, they are not for eating. He raised an eyebrow. They are for seeing. He smiled. And in the morning, they stepped onto the red path, one stone at a time, not naming what they were building, but walking it just the same. Hast du selbst schon erlebt, das Gemein Vertautwort, nicht für das, was gitten hat, sondern einfach dafür, werst? Oder kannst du Menschen wie Taya, Lies, Stark, Überschen, den Teil dies Geschicht, schreib uns in die Kommentar, was die meisten berührt hat. Und ob du glaubst, dass ein Mensch ohne Wurzeln deine Heimat finden kann. Wenn dich dies Geschicht bewegt hat, zeig es mit einem Like. Abonniere unseren Kanal und hilf uns, mehr solcher Stimmen zu machen.